remind
And.
procedure on things like administrative versus legislative,
Right.
because we just hear, a lot of people don't realize that some things aren't up for discussion.
I have five, there's 5 days I have no recollection.
Here is.
So they took the infection out of my cervical spine, moved my heart on my shoulder, and the plastic spacer in there now. But I've got
How you doing today?
my lumbar spine.
Nice to see you too.
And it probably, I need to have my fusion.
Okay.
Brought up a level.
Okay,
Because
but it should be the same as what you got before, right? Okay, just wanted to double check.
How are you? It's addendum.
This is the,
Oh, this will
the
be-
old, I think it was emailed to us as well. This is the old ordinance,
Yeah.
right?
How long has it been going on? I heard.
Which one?
Agri-tourism.
Agri-tourism?
This,
It has been,
particular petition,
right here, oh, this petition,
Oh, I think it was on there, something,
This-
2023.
yeah, this one I think has been going on for about 2 years.
and then,
And then the previous one, we've given them legal, there's not an actual deadline. But we've given them, we talked to legal and they said, why don't you at least try to say, are you gonna withdraw it? This is the one last time. Either withdraw it or decide where you're gonna go with that by December 30th.
because that was over in North Fork, isn't it?
No, that one's over in, Patio Spring.
Oh, yeah.
That's just that, and so this one's in a different area.
Yeah,
So
so,
this is our last one that I'm aware of under the old one.
Provided that the Patio Springs doesn't have that.
Yeah.
this is the grandfather ordinance, right?
Right.
That
Yes.
they're under.
Yeah, and that was updated around that time, but these guys had an application already in.
Yeah.
Well, you know, under the gas.
I'll leave. More of these for a year.
Well, thanks for the invite to attend the planning meeting. It was interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I was there Friday.
Okay.
Conference, yeah. And, the most relevant class I was just talking
Mhm.
about was crowd control at planning commission.
Oh,
meetings.
yeah.
But just being very upfront, like having a strong chair set the tone and just explain to the general public what the process is, you know, and how they participate, how they don't participate. And, you know, what's allowed, what's not. It's really interesting. I took like a bunch of notes. We'll have to just get together and chat, go walk the dog, send anything. But it was actually really, really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, the state ombudsman, he's kind of discouraged. Public comment on things that don't require a public hearing. Just because it kind of gives the public a false sense
Yeah.
of hope that they can, you know.
Yeah. If
That's
it's
what I was
administrative, it's a yes or no. It doesn't matter how you feel about it.
Right.
But it's always good to let them, you know.
It is, and
It's that's where I was saying, like, it's a little bit of quicksand, because I want everyone to feel heard,
But I think
but
that's.
it
really
has to be
important.
reminded to them that we cannot take their comment
Yep.
as for deliberation,
Yeah.
you know, which is a weird.
But another thing that, you know, just to give people a voice, to allow them to be heard was huge too. And
Yeah.
I like how you just said, you know, this is a matter, because it doesn't sway whether we, you know, pass it or not. That you share your feelings if you like.
Yeah.
That way that they feel heard, and
right,
that was pretty relevant.
it is.
A lot of people-
You feel like you're not just. There.
Right.
Yeah, because, you know, and they said, you know, it's intimidating because we're, you know, up on a bench
Right.
and we're kind of elevated, and we're different and apart, you know. One council talked about like really hot things, you know, that brought a lot of public in. They had a pre-meeting where they all kind of mingled, all the counts.
Oh, really?
All the commissioners and all the public, and they had, you know, public information, and just talked about it, it's like Q&A, just general, you know, and then they started the meeting, just so they could maybe disseminate, share some information. And it said it diffused a lot of tension.
Oh, that's nice.
It was actually, really effective in some, I mean, and there were a lot of chairs and co-chairs and just commission people just kind of shining all the state.
Well, it would be nice too, because this meeting right now if people, it's noticed that they come in to hear, but sometimes they come, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
They usually just show us hi. And,
Yeah. Well, and another thing I thought was relevant too is the loud minority that shows up at these meetings that they say a lot of the same things. But the general populace feels like, they don't have a problem with it, and so they think, it's just gonna be okay, so that you don't hear from the people who don't oppose things. And the kind of the majority of the thought was with a lot of people is, the majority of people who don't oppose it, you don't hear from them. But the few people who do oppose it, you hear from them, and they're loud, and they show up at meetings. And other people don't show up because they just think it's gonna be okay, they trust in the system.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that?
One way to help with that is to remind people that you don't have to speak at the meeting, that you're able to submit public comment via email or whatnot to the staff. So if they want to stay, if they're not comfortable speaking in public, or if they're nervous that they'll get targeted for whatever that is that they're gonna say, they can submit it, not anonymously, but via the staff, and the staff sends it to all of us, and we'll read it. They don't have to speak that night.
I think you touched on something, they won't get targeted. I think a lot of people are afraid to speak up because there are some people out there, not necessarily our group, but we've seen it where they can be fairly abrupt and, interesting.
I think we have, if, Commissioner Morby is, has he spoken with you? He's on,
Yeah, he had some health issues.
Put it down like a minute
So
ago.
he's on Zoom, so we had a court.
Right, I was gonna say, so if it's all right with people, just in case we run out of time, for any questions people might have. And I'll go ahead and let Felix get his food and come back. Felix is gonna, he's our representative
Guys got
here.
any questions, ask away.
Just, what is this?
Oh,
This looks like it's a different county's planning office.
Oh, the font or what do you
Well,
mean?
it's from, Tiffin Planning Department, Morgan, Utah.
Oh, Kippen Planning,
The
yeah.
questions and answers.
So she's like a contractor and she's a private planner.
Okay,
So she provides planning services.
okay, we've had that come up in the past as well. I just wasn't sure if this was like, is this also being presented down in Morgan, Utah? Okay, these are
Sure.
questions just simply to help out.
People who weren't, and because I didn't understand it at first. And then after Thursday, I did. This request is being reviewed under the previous code, not the current code that was just updated last year. So,
Correct.
So Felix done out.
yeah, so in my head, because I sat there for all those, read that thing a bunch of times, my head thinks about the current code. But this isn't it. Or this. Request isn't that.
Grandfather.
That's
This is the previous code here.
That is, yes.
Felix, would you mind just maybe going through and highlighting a few of the things on this that?
Yeah.
And then some of the changes that the applicant had made some comment after we met with the chair and vice chair.
Yeah. And so, yeah, when we met with chair and vice chair, there were some questions about, access and seasonality. And also the option for temporary portable restrooms. And so it looks like the applicant was able to answer those questions pretty clearly. Did you guys see that email?
Is that included in this? I saw the email.
No, it was an email that came through and it included a Word doc that answered those questions. And so as far as,
That's not printed.
no,
Could
As
you
far-
review for
Yeah,
us
can you
real
just
quick
review it?
what the
Yeah.
answers were?
yeah, as far as the seasonality, I mean, it would just be, during the
During summer. So they
spring,
said.
summer, fall, yeah. And let me see if I can open that email I sent out.
This one seems to make more sense, with at least the acreage.
The way this is set up, though, it wouldn't pass
The new one.
a new code.
No,
Okay, so you're gonna pull that up and summarize it for us?
Yeah,
Did Marta send that?
yeah, Marta sent it. I asked her to send it. And. Let me bring that here.
Oh, thank you. You got, that's a copy of the ordinance. Oh, okay.
My computer is bugging out. I don't know what's going on. Hold on a second.
External Thursday?
What did they say about the RV parking?
Right.
Here it is.
Is it something you can easily read off?
Yeah, do you want me to read it? I have it here.
Go ahead.
Responses from Tyson Lloyd and Blue. So comments from Health Department, can they have a porta potty? Response, we are open to providing a porta potty required by the Health Department. Our initial plan is to establish a youth club where families can come and harvest their own produce. This would involve a small number of participants at any given time and would not be open to general public. We're unsure if a club meeting in parentheses would require public restroom facilities, but if so, we are happy to comply. The porta potty can be screened from the road with trees to maintain an aesthetic of the property. Question seasonality. Response, there would be a seasonality to the U-pick, spring, summer, and fall. They may extend slightly into the winter months with greenhouse production. If and when the health farm and ARC are established, they would likely operate year round.
I'm sorry, is that saying that the workers will be year round? And only the U-pick is seasonal?
Well, that's what it says, is U-pick will be seasonal until the health farm established and they possibly operate year round. Now, I'm assuming that would mean, you know, employees.
Yeah,
That's a little bit of a concern because if the
You've got housing year
the
round.
workers are year round and they're in trailers. That's
That's got the
Yeah.
best location there in that situation.
gonna run into a health department concern.
Yeah, waste disposal, motor coach area details question. Response, the motor coach area would be located in the east field and screened from view of the highway. Ideally, we plan to operate this area for self-contained RVs, meaning the visitors would provide their own water and sanitation services, like we just mentioned right there. This approach would allow us to participate in programs like Harvest Host, which invites travelers to stay at farms in exchange for purchasing goods without the significant cost of installing hookups. If we are permitted to offer a self-contained RV area initially, we would reach out to the health department for the necessary permits if and when we decide to add hookups in the future. And then irrigation water question, is that from a ditch? We have two sources of irrigation water. The response, one is from the mountain canal, which is gravity fed to our farm, and the other is from Huntsville irrigation, which enters the property already pressurized. Question, water services, culinary water, this is the response, culinary water already exists for the farm, but no additional shares are available for new hookups. Therefore, a well will be drilled. The farm hopes that this CUP can offer flexibility and adaptability for the farm to stay financially viable into the future. We intend to work with the health department, engineering, and fire marshal prior to initiating each use in this CUP, thereby allowing to grow and adapt as resources are available to us. With regard to the health department, we understand that the size scope of various uses might necessitate different well and septic requirements that have a wide range in cost to implement. For that reason, we hope to be able to work with them as we move forward in phases, ensuring we are within compliance of their requirements and have a scope within our financial capacity at any given time. Which sounds like,
So it said, if I heard it right, that there's no culinary water available to the property, so they're just gonna drill a well. You can't do that.
we'll have culinary property, one share for the existing property on the.
For a single family home.
But no additional share.
Yeah, so you just can't drill a well.
They gotta go through the approval.
You've gotta have the water before you drill the well.
Yeah.
Sell it to you for about $500 a year.
I don't think they will for an existing property.
Well,
They
I
will.
looked into it to do it just one myself. You can just basically call them up and buy it.
Really? No,
Well, but
that's the cheap part.
they need to have that though.
Yeah,
That's 40 grand.
yeah, and if you don't feel comfortable with some of these things, you can either table it or make those conditions as part of your approval, but. I wouldn't just approve it without putting
Yep.
those in place or having tabling and asking them to address those things.
Right.
So I drove by this place the other day. And so what they wanna do, they've got a long, long way to go. Long way.
Is there any stream at all on the road?
Any what?
Any
No,
stream?
No,
they had some greenhouses and, there's some stuff going on, but
so,
nothing like this. And no infrastructure other than. old hurdles and
and
stuff.
Felix, we had asked if we could get an idea, maybe a sketching or drawing of this motor coach area, how many motor coaches would be allowed to be there, what was the spacing, what was the, and did they not send anything? I don't see anything.
No, I didn't ask that
You
question.
didn't.
So my question was motor coach area details.
Mhm.
And so that was included with the response.
And there's another issue with that, and, let's say they have 9 or 10 in there, there's no hookups and 9 or 10 generators are running. Neighbors are gonna hear that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
gonna be a nuisance,
Direct neighbors.
even across the street down here.
Oh, yeah, there's two
So-
across the street.
And just some kind of random questions of it. As I read through the packet, the deeper I got, a couple things would just pop up that weren't in the beginning, like the beginning pages, there's a mention of long-term, they're interested in basically an ADU, for maybe family members or something. They're looking for this pole barn and they're looking for the motor, a couple of different living situations. But then later in the packet, all of a sudden there's mention of a restaurant.
Oh, yeah, so. The reason why I included that later in the packet was
Uh-huh.
because those were my initial comments
Okay.
for their first submittal. And so a lot of these things still apply, but the restaurant probably not, because he didn't include that with his revised narrative. There's no mention of a restaurant. If you look on his narrative in Exhibit A,
Yeah.
you can see he's got a list of proposed uses.
Mhm.
And those are included because those are there because of the size of the operation.
Mhm.
So those are things that he could pursue just purely based on the size.
Uh-huh.
Patios, yeah.
Yes,
Right, but so are you saying then that the restaurant is old discussion and not
the
part of this
restaurant, I think there's still potential for a restaurant.
Because then there's a whole other thing, there's even comment in here about how you'll need to have certain. Obviously permits and, where is it,
Under,
water and.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm not
let's see, where does it?
familiar enough with the old code, does that allow restaurants, or would that be under a different zoning?
Let's see here,
Oh, yeah, it talks about dumpsters and the restaurant and,
let's see. Okay, it looks like he left restaurant off of. Cause you've got, the closest thing I can find to that would be the. On-farm store and retail market,
right,
but I don't see restaurant in there, so yeah, you could probably just ignore that restaurant. Comment,
Has he provided any elevations of what these buildings are gonna look like?
yes, so that would be in,
They just, the ones I see in here are just more picture concepts.
yeah, and that's what they provided when I asked for architectural. Style, drawing twin style, architectural style. That's the core of it, isn't it? Yeah, so that would be exhibit, what is this one? Yeah, exhibit D.
So on the barn greenhouse is, what's that material made of? Is he said? And the metal, wood,
Yeah, that's,
is he gonna be here?
yeah, would be good. That's a good question, I'm not sure what material that is, but. But you could probably go with any material.
Oh, yeah, missing these land use codes. Weren't learning it.
And just to clarify for me, Felix, where it says that everything outdoor lighting will be compliant with the outdoor lighting code, is that consistent with the dark sky code or are those separate?
That's right,
Okay.
yes. Dark sky lighting.
Do you know if he's currently, raising animals up the north pasture, or is that something he plans to do by renting that pasture or?
You know what? The narrative does touch on that topic.
I think it's not something. It's being grazed, animal grazing site, that's.
But I think that's
Will be.
future, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it's currently or,
When I drove by, I did not see animals grazing, but that doesn't mean they weren't. They just
Mhm.
could have been out of sight.
That's a. Grazing or pasture existing, but maybe that was future.
I think it's future.
Mhm.
And truth is, there's not a lot of grazing land
Mhm.
there, and it didn't appear that there's a watering system to enhance that opportunity.
Well, the Ogden Valley, was it canal?
Yeah,
They may have water.
Right.
Bisects, that ditch bisects there.
They may have water, but it isn't, up that slope is all dry.
Yeah.
There's.
I'd be concerned about the ADU with not additional water. as
So that's
well.
what I'm 100% concerned about.
I don't know if this answers the question, but on page 205 of the staff report, right in the middle, there's an agri-tourism applicability and review section.
Mhm.
The second paragraph of that, I do remember reading that, what you were just saying. The second paragraph there says, it's written in present tense, the approximate 29 acres south of the canal are currently being farmed.
Yes.
The remaining 66 acres is used for grazing.
There
It's
you go.
written.
Yeah, it is saying is,
It's written in present tense. I don't know if that's intentional,
okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yeah.
because I remembered seeing that too.
So I read that, and when I drove by, I just didn't see any gap, but
And well,
could have been.
as for the ADU, can you remind me of our current rules about ADUs?
So the current rules is you can have one ADU. If you have either the development right or the acreage for it. And there are some size requirements that would come into play, and if you're renting it out to the public, you need a business license. Yeah, that's
And if it's
primarily,
rented out to the public, that works under this old
yeah,
this old ordinance. And then, but they would need obviously to get water rights and like all the different things you need to get to build a
yeah.
home.
Yeah, if they want to build an ADU, they need a building permit, and when they submit application for an ADU. For building permit, they have to submit health department and septic system information that basically says they're approved to do so.
So if you have enough water, right,
Mhm.
through your existing, through the basin,
You can tap it up.
it can be more than one house up to the same well, as long as there's enough water, right?
Mhm.
I would be a little concerned about approving an ADU without that stuff. I mean, we do have the requirement in here that the owner shall obtain the appropriate permits.
Mhm.
But when we get into that specific, I think it might be setting him up for failure if he doesn't have those things. And it might be good to have that taken care of before you approve that, as far as that use,
So what are you suggesting? Separating it out?
that you don't allow that and he comes back in and either amends it to get that
Mhm.
at some point, or you table it and ask him to address those things before you approve that use.
So catch me up on when you say ADU, it doesn't say that they're requesting an ADU.
Yeah, it does.
It does. It's not,
In the, over in the, where was there narrative?
It's interesting because it's not in the summary background.
So it's not, but it's not in the listing.
But it's throughout his narrative and on the maps and everything. I will say the summary background leaves off also the little farm stand. There's a couple things that aren't in the summary background. It lists a couple things he wants to build, but it doesn't list everything. And then as you read further into the packet, they're listed.
That's where I had some concerns, I just read it in there.
So after reading through this, I thought, you could initiate this, but then, and it could kind of keep going to this monster, but with conditional use permits, is there any body that follows up and polices conditional use permits to make sure that they're actually working under the conditions that are permitted?
Yeah,
How does that work?
so staff goes out and looks at those things on CUPs and makes sure they're complying with the conditions. But we only do that the first time, and because we just don't have enough staff to do that, so then we rely on complaints. And then if there are, then we go out and.
Things can go wild sideways, so
What was that?
things can go sideways, you're on
Yeah.
the road and on a
And
conditional permit and you just don't know.
then if they do, then we bring that back to the planning commission to possibly look at them and ultimately conditional use permits.
So, like it's listed in the proposed uses, it says accessory dwelling. But that's what he's proposing.
In his words.
Wouldn't that, I mean, I would have thought that would have been a separate application.
Well, it can be part of the agri-tourism.
Everything could be.
Right,
Pretty
and
open.
that's what it is.
So that means we probably should just be a little more narrow in this specific conditional use, be like, hey, we're good with agritourism use, but like, not approving you to build
Yeah,
a bunch of ADUs.
that, the things that I would recommend you maybe dial in a little bit more on is the agritourism and then the trailer parking. Those are some concerns I see just right up. Because right now he shows a green blob of trailer parking, a motor coach area, but how many is that?
Right. That's
You
what I
know,
was
how
wondering.
is the backing and the circulation gonna work? How is sorry,
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
and how does the septic and all of that work? You know, he's saying he's going to remove the trailers and haul them off to empty the gray water and things like that on site. But, you know, at what point, you know, does it seem unreasonable, you know, if he has one or two? Maybe that seems reasonable, you know, given the health department approval, but if he has 20. Almost seems like he needs connections and then work through the health department on the right type of septic system.
So just really, we don't have much time before the meeting starts, and I wanted to ask because before this meeting, I went and reviewed the original binder you gave me when I was brought onto this commission and we had our first training session or whatever. And in there, I saw it say, the commission should always look to either approve or deny, do not do like, don't try to give, like throw a bone to somebody or like, oh, well, we'll do a little lesser. Is that, because it seems like you're saying, well, if you peel that out, you could approve it for them on this basis.
Well, what I'm indicating here is maybe you don't have enough information to approve some of the uses on there. And maybe you have enough information to approve other uses. And so I just want to, whatever your comfort level is on that is what we want to help you with.
But if it's approvable, like within this grandfathered in ordinance, are we able to say, but not that part? Because
Condition,
if it's a condition,
Yes,
even if it's in here.
well,
as the conditions. Yeah, as a conditional use permit, you can look at the impact that it has on the health, safety and welfare of. I mean, because those are some of the standards that we look at when we review a conditional use permit. And so, you know, if there's some issues with, you know, sewer and water and things like that. I think that's reasonable to ask them to provide some more information, so that you feel comfortable with that.
But rather than tabling and saying, come back with more information, you're saying we could approve the agritourism without the
So like,
housing department.
No, well, and I was mentioning maybe you table it to address those things, just to be fair to the applicant. So
Oh,
he
okay.
has time to address those things instead of, and I'm not. I apologize, I'm not wanting to formulate your
Right.
recommendation, I'm just throwing out options.
No, understood.
Or you could possibly make that a condition in your conditions of approval.
yes, basically you could say something like, you can have, or like, we want to encourage agritourism and you have the land, you meet the requirements to have trailers, visitors.
Mhm.
They need to be visitors and you need to have hours for, you don't have the generator hours, like
Yeah.
other conditions, right? You could set things like that. And I think I think it's legal to say something like, you can, they can only stay so many days, these trailers. And if that's
Mhm.
just, that's the requirement.
Yeah.
Like, we add that as a
These are
condition.
visitor trailers, they're not providing the trailers.
Yeah, like, it's a trailer that's here for, more than a week or something like that,
No.
or whatever, like temporary, because,
Long-term rental.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which he might want, and I would understand, but it's just a lot to manage, and we could say health department is difficult, you'd have to come back. And you
Yeah.
could set that as a condition, you
Yeah.
have to come back with how you're going to mitigate
Manage,
that.
especially in the winter.
Sewer.
Yeah. And for the Eagles campground, for instance, we require the trailers, they have to be out by October 31st, and they can't
Right.
come in until like
Mayor.
May or something like that,
Mhm.
yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Good info, that's good.
It's good to see you. Up and down. You feeling okay? Pretty good. Good.
We now have two commissioners now.
I'm, glad to see you.
I just, I heard Commissioner Moore, we have broken ribs.
You have looked better.
I have.
Don't look bad.
Well, better to be seen than viewed, right? Well, there's
That's
that.
for sure.
It's,
Commissioner Wampler. One thing I forgot to mention in the pre-meeting is that our work session will no longer be on the agenda. So if you wouldn't mind announcing that in case someone's here for that.
Oh, at the end of the meeting?
Yeah, so. So, the work session item has been removed.
It's on the agenda that was in.
The applicant has asked that it be removed
Oh,
from. the
gotcha.
agenda.
I didn't.
I
still didn't
meant to
understand.
tell
Okay,
you that in the pre-meeting.
perfect. So that's been taken off. Okay. All right. I don't think, did you have it? The answer. Okay, there we go. All right. We're here to open the meeting of October 22nd, 2024. Thank you to those that are in attendance or online. And we'll go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag.
Present, we have Commissioner Morby via Zoom. We have Commissioner Wampler, Commissioner Schumann, Commissioner Schweppe, Commissioner Frower, and Commissioner Barber in attendance, with Commissioner Burton excused. We're going to move on to approving the minutes of September 24th. Has everyone up on the commission had an opportunity to read the minutes? And does anyone have any additions or corrections? Well, I have a comment. So just to adjust, these are minutes of an actual official meeting. At the top of the first page, it says minutes of a work session. So just changing that to a meeting. The date under Article 1, minutes, August 6th and 27th. It talks about August 6th and 24th, when it should be the 27th. We can just change that date. First sentence under 1. Those were all of my comments. Anybody else have any comments or additions for the minutes? All right, then those will go on to be approved with those corrections. Does anyone have any ex parte communication or conflicts of interest to disclose? This is the time to do so. Hearing none. Before we announce tonight's agenda, I will go ahead and announce that there was a change made that on the agenda that was made public, as well as here tonight, we were scheduled to have a work session after tonight's meeting, and that item has been removed from tonight's agenda. So if anyone is online or here in person to participate with the work session item, that will not be happening this evening. And with that, I'm going to ask Planning Director Grover to explain to everybody listening what we do with administrative items.
Thank you, Chair. As we look at this item, this actually falls under the old Agri-tourism code. So as you review this, you will be reviewing it under the old Agri-tourism code. We've given you a copy of that as you consider this item. This is considered an administrative item, and as such, you will review it under the code and the conditional use permit, making sure that it complies with those standards. And if it does, then you can approve with conditions, or you can deny if you feel like it's not meeting the code. Typically on administrative items, we do not take public comment, but if you would like to take public comment, you're more than welcome to take public comment on those items. And Mr. Lleverino will be presenting.
All right, good evening, commissioners. So what we have before you is a request for a conditional use permit. So the zoning we're dealing with in this area is AV3 and F5 for Forest 5 and Agricultural Valley 3. You can see this slide I have up on the screen indicates the kind of the general area and the current use of the property. You have some residential use and as well as it's largely agricultural use. And so the project area is located 9356 East to Highway 39, and the basically encompassing 95 or 96 acres of land. And so there's a couple across several parcels under the same ownership. And so and with this request, they're looking to operate an agritourism. And agritourism is basically a portion of code that was written into law for the county to allow for these rural farmers and farm areas to basically bring in a little bit extra income and support their farm, and also invite visitors to see what type of operation goes into what the type of work that goes into creating a farm and that type of environment. So because a lot of folks, they don't really understand the whole wide range of things that come into play with operating a farm and creating produce
and food that we eat and enjoy, pick up at the grocery store wrapped up in plastic. And so I think it's what they have proposed is a couple of things. You've got a U-pick field with fruits, berries, and vegetables. You also have what they would like to do in at a later time when they have the funds and the means to do so would be a 2-story pole barn that would serve for produce processing as well as accommodations for their seasonal workers, as well as a motor coach caravan area where visitors can come and park and also maybe stay for a couple nights while they participate in these agritourism activities. And so let's see here, going on to the next slide here. With a conditional use permit application, hope I'm not froze up. I was having computer issues earlier. Did it change yet? Okay. Okay. Let's see. Let me try this again. And I guess we don't absolutely need just the slideshow, but it's going to be helpful. Let's see if I can maximize this view and so progress through these slides. Okay. So here's a view looking eastward, and the property in question is on the left-hand side. And let's see here, there are 2 access points that are currently being utilized by this property owner. They do have access permits from UDOT. The UDOT's intention would be to line up those access points with what's across the street. And so that should be a requirement that the applicant would be able to comply with. And here's the area map showing the parcels that take up that 96 acres, as well as some of the proposals, which I covered already, which you have a health farm, U-pick operation, motor coach, and a farm store. And as far as the conditional use review, there are some standards to consider when looking at a conditional use permit. You've got your safety for persons, you've got your standards related to infrastructure and amenities, the standards related to the environment, standards related to current qualities, characteristics of the surrounding area, compliance with the intent of the general plan, standards related to performance, standards generally, and voluntary contributions that would provide satisfactory compliance with applicable standards. And then you also have design review standards that come into play with something like this, where you're looking at traffic safety and congestion, outdoor advertising, landscaping, building and site layout, utility easement and drainage and other engineering questions, prior development concept plan approvals associated with any rezone. So the staff's recommendation in this circumstance would be for approval based on the conditions in the report. The sign may be placed no closer than 10 feet to the property line. At this time, the owner does not have a sign plan, but they do intend to have a business sign, at which point they would just obtain a land use permit for that sign. We would review their sign plan, give them a land use permit to make sure it conforms with the Ogden Valley sign requirements. Access construction requirements within the right of way would be done according to UDOT recommendations and requirements. The owner shall obtain appropriate permits as far as when they actually go to build additional bedrooms, additional bathrooms, these permanent type structures, they will need to obtain the appropriate permits from the health department and the building department and things like that. So we'll make sure those get acquired along the process as they continue to grow this operation. And we also are looking at number 5, number 4, business licenses. That always comes into play when you're dealing with a commercial type element of an operation where business license would also be necessary. So Weaver County engineering requirements, which are quite minimal in this case, what they would be looking at if they propose any hard surface parking areas, then the engineering would get involved to make sure they have the stormwater management plan figured out, as well as if they plan to do any work within the public right of way, they would work with the UDOT.
Yeah, I just have to just make sure. So the way you're saying if they plan to do parking. So the plans I saw showed parking.
That's
Do
correct.
you mean if or because
mean-
they plan to do parking,
Well-
engineering will have to look at it?
Planning or parking is necessary. However, hard surface parking is not necessary. So, yes. And so going on to 6, fire marshal requirements are satisfied, as well as, so that would be taken care of with building permit inspections. And all Weber Morgan Health Department requirements are satisfied before infrastructure dependent uses shall. And that concludes what I had to say on this topic. The applicant, Mr. Tyson Lloyd, is here. Any questions for staff or the owner?
Just to first clear up and make sure everybody understood and make sure I understood correctly. I believe what was just said was that, yes, they are having parking. In the packet, it says 60 space parking. It's just that the ordinance itself doesn't demand paved parking. Is that
That's
what you were
correct.
saying? So
Yes.
there is parking, up to 60 spaces, but it's just
Yes.
not paved.
Yes.
So
No, not required because you're not dealing with impervious surfaces.
Felix, I have a question about, so it discussed that the applicant is, I guess, in talks already with UDOT about the
Yes.
entrances and exits.
That's right.
I thought I had read that there was one entrance, but you're saying that there are 2.
There would be 2, there
Would
is
be
allowance
2.
for 2, yes,
Okay, there is one, there would be 2.
yes.
Okay, and if it's not too impertinent, who pays for that? Is there an impact fee to the applicant, or is UDOT? How does this work?
So the developer, the applicant, the owner would pay for that.
Okay. Do any of the commissioners have any questions to further discuss with planning staff?
Chair, I have a question for Felix.
Yes.
Actually, 2. Felix, can you explain to me number 6 and number 7, what the requirements would be for this to be able to do this with the fire marshal? Is that something?
So the fire marshal, I would have to look at the fire marshal comments, because as far as like fire protection, I know they do this in some circumstances where if you have a structure built in the forest, they want to see a clear zone. And so there are also requirements to, if you're going to be operating a farm store, they want to see maximum capacity limits, emergency egress, things like that would come into play.
And what about the health department issues?
Yeah, and so health department, they would primarily require, right here where I was able to gather a health department review. And I just wrote it down quickly here. So they would require further review for the lodging of seasonal workers and the caravan area.
Was the caravan area, the parking area for the motor homes and travel trailers that we referred to?
Yes.
And initially does this contemplate some kind of a septic dumping station, or would these motor homes and travel trailers be expected to haul off their gray water and wastewater and
You know, that's a good question. I think it could be accomplished in a manner of way, in a number of ways. If, for instance, if the owner decides to build a permanent restroom facility, like a common restroom that's connected to the septic system, then that would obviously need to be approved through the health department.
would that need to be addressed and proposed for us to be able to approve the requests being made?
You know, honestly, I don't think it would, in my opinion, because what they're trying to accomplish in this circumstance would be to start small and ramp up. As they're ramping up, we're going to ensure that they obtain those approvals from the health department and other agencies that have that expertise.
Thank you.
Does the commission have any other further questions for staff?
There was a question about seasonality.
Yeah.
With the code. Or that was addressed in the applicant's responses. So this will be not a year round.
Well, from what I could tell,
Actually.
with that question answer scenario that we walked through was asking about seasonality for the owner. I think spring, summer, fall would be primarily operated for the U-pick, but the fact that they do have some greenhouses on site, they could grow some crops year round, I would imagine, and that might be a good question for the owner.
Because that would require facilities for workers or.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Okay.
That's a good question.
So that everyone's clear, what I plan to do is if nobody has any further questions at this exact moment for Felix, we'll give the applicant an opportunity to come up to speak to us and have questions from the commission to the applicant. And then when that concludes, I'll ask if anybody wants to go back to staff in case there's anything that pops up at that point. So if nobody has anything right this moment for Felix, I'll go ahead and invite our applicant to come up and speak.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tyson Lloyd. I am a farmer. I've been farming in Uinta. I started my farm in Uinta in Weber County, and then we acquired this land up in Huntsville and hope to be able to farming long-term in the county and providing food for everyone that's in our community. The purpose of this conditional use permit is for us to be able to diversify our income as a farm and to operate not just sustainably as far as how our agriculture goes, but as you all know, it's hard to make a living farming, and to diversify our income so that we can stay sustainable financially as well. I understand that a lot of the applications you guys get are more for a very concise, there's a developer, they're going to build XYZ subdivision and whatever it is, like it's very specific. As regulations are constantly changing, what my goal is to try and create a long-term plan for the farm that can be also nimble, and that we may choose to use some of these uses in the future, or we may choose that either because we're not financially able to, or it just doesn't make sense to pursue a different avenue without having to repeatedly come back and seek conditional use permits for separate uses. And I caught the tail end of your guys' comments earlier. I understand that probably some hesitancy with the impreciseness of like, well, where is this exactly going to be? Where is this building going to exactly be? And for that, I've worked with Felix. I'm really trying to create a plan where we can grow into it, but I don't have millions of dollars to create all this today by any means. So as Felix said it quite well, it's like we want to just start small, start with a U-pick. Maybe if we could have some people stay in travel trailers. There's a website called Harvest Hosts where people can stay and work on a farm and in exchange for having a place to stay. And, you know, if something like that is successful, to be able to build onto that. And for that reason, these conditions that Felix proposed make sense, at least to me, in the sense that, yeah, once we get serious and it's like, we're going to build a building, we're going to build a farm store, of course, we're going to work with fire marshal and engineering and all the other regulations to make sure we're in compliance. My hope that you all would take with this is that you look at the uses as a whole and see if there's any problems with the uses as they are. And so long as, and I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but this is just what my ideal world would be, then understand that the various regulators in our county, you know, the fire marshal, engineering, health department, will then be part of the condition would be that we work with them to make sure that we're crossing our I's and crossing our T's, dotting our I's, etc. So that's the big overview. We want to keep growing vegetables and hopefully have a U-pick and do some perennial crops. And we've looked at all these uses as potential uses that we could implement. And I guess, and then just understand that some of them may or may not be done, and some of them may take 10 or 20 years until we get to. But we're trying to have something that we can work towards. We don't want to have to say, let's say we're like saving an area on our farm to one day be a caravan area, but then the regulations change and we can't even do that, for example. We just want to know that the groundwork has been laid for us to work towards a future with these various uses. That's all I have at the moment.
Sure, I have a couple questions. So, thanks for your application, giving us some thoughts. Well, I'm sure that your goal, I like looking at it, it's great. And that's exactly what the agritourism is to try and encourage that type of thing. We also have a problem in the valley. How long have you been in the valley now?
I've been there for about 3 years.
Okay, so we've had a pretty large issue with people trying to create Airbnb type things and using all kinds of codes. So with that being said, our goal is to incentivize, I think, and I think the commissioners agree, we want you to do a farm. We want it to be successful. I think we even want you to have people come and stay and do all the great things that, you know, we all want to experience and our kids to experience. But we have some concerns that we would love for you to address. I think some of them would be, you know, there's talk of accessory dwelling units, trailers, the timing of those. Would you be? I mean, I think some of the conditions we would ask is that those not be permanent. You know, those aren't there's something that come and go. It's not something that we're constantly having, partially because of the health standards and because we're just not, I don't know that that's the intent of the agritourism. Is it to be a trailer park? It's supposed to be they come stay for the weekend, they come stay for a week, maybe. Not necessarily we have a farm, but we just opened up 30 trailer spots and said, here we go.
Yeah.
That's not the intention of the agritourism. The intention is what you said, and we believe you, but we would want to make sure that the neighbors in the county can come back and say, hey, you applied for this and said that this is what it would look like, and this is what it is today. We need to rescind this. So we need to kind of set some guidelines. That's the way that I think we want to make sure that works for you in your vision, but also we're able to come back and say, that's not what you said, because you may sell this. We don't know. So we have to make sure that this fits. So between, some conditions would be timing of use for those things, health department standards, because obviously a trailer can come and stay for the weekend. That can make it through the weekend somewhere else, and that's fine. But long term, it just doesn't.
Yeah,
it can work, but it's difficult. So we'd love to make sure that the county can say, hey, you didn't hold up your end of the bargain here.
Yeah.
Generators is another concern from what I heard in here is that there's not infrastructure, so people are gonna want power, right? If they're
Mhm.
coming and staying, if they don't have it, they'll wanna run the generator. Well, the valley's a very quiet place, I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And it echoes, it seems. I can hear neighbors talking from a long ways away. Generators are gonna be very disturbing.
Yeah.
Because you can't, I mean, not everybody brings different generators. Some are really loud, some are not so bad.
Uh-huh.
So those are some of my concerns. I think that we would want addressed a little bit before we could look at that. And I think I'm willing to say we set some of those standards and I mean, I would think your input would be good in this and say, hey, what was reasonable? I don't know if anybody else has any standards that they're concerned about. As they looked at it, that we could discuss.
I have some questions that I would just like fleshed out a little bit more. How many RVs would be in the RV area?
It's hard to say. I don't know for sure, right? So the
maximum
code
number?
allows up for 20.
So potentially 20.
Potentially 20, yeah. At the biggest, I highly doubt it would reach that, but.
But if
you-
so, potentially 20 generators.
And I would,
Could reach that, but all I want to make sure is that you're being respectful to neighbors.
yeah, I think that generator, I concerns.
And,
valid.
that's really all my concern is. I'm happy, I mean, it's great if that works for you and but I want to make sure you're doing an agritourism thing, not we just park trailers here all the time thing.
I get
That's my
that.
big concern.
I just went to Moab and we stayed in like, I mean, essentially they're like, kind of mobile home trailer things, right? So now that you say it, I can imagine what's your potentially worst case scenario, imagining like these.
Well, there's
We have-
trailer parks. I mean, you drive down the highway, you see them, they're full all the time.
Yeah.
Camping places.
Uh-huh.
Our intention here is we want you to have people come stay. But we're not saying, hey, just because you have land, you can build a trailer park.
Yeah.
That's not what this is.
Yep.
So how long did you see these, I forget the website you mentioned, but these farming RVs staying for? Thank you, Harvest Hosts.
Yeah, that's just one example of one I was familiar with. Honestly, I imagine them sitting for a few days. Most people who are doing that, they're using that as they're traveling across the country and they're staying at a place for a few days and moving on. If we did one day invest into infrastructure so that there was, we work with the health department, of course, and get everything in line and had hookups, I would imagine up to a week or I guess 2 weeks at max.
So what you're asking for, is it fair to say that what you're asking for under current situation is a few days at a time?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. With that, I mean, I guess if you wanted to add a condition where it's like, well, with no hookups, if you wanted to say like no generators or whatever, something like that, and you can only spend so many days, that would make sense. Ideally, I would like the opportunity to expand the time frame, assuming the infrastructure was in place for you guys to feel comfortable.
I think that's great. And I think what I would agree with, so if we said, hey, these are short-term trailers, the no more than, I don't know, say 5 days, 5 nights, I don't know what, a week maybe. I think that's probably more than what even a trailer can handle without having to dump most of them. So, but if we set some guideline like that, anything outside of that, I think would need to be resubmitted. Does that make sense? So you go and you put in the infrastructure or you're ready, and you want to look at changing your agritourism, I would think we'd need to resubmit. That would be my condition, right? It'd be like, oh yeah, like we basically approve this based on you're gonna have people harvest, they come for a day or two, come for 3 days, whatever. And it's, not so intrusive. And then when you're going, okay, we're gonna have people long-term, we're gonna have this, we've got it approved, we've got a plan, we want to grow. Then we look at it again and go, okay, this is this, you're still in line, we'll go for it. I would.
My slight concern with that, and I don't totally understand, but if I reapply, the code's changed, right? And so, well, in the future, they may not be allowed, right? And then on the other side, would everything else have to be up to date to the newest code? Like as we're applying under, and I just don't understand how the.
I think that the new agritourism code is just as lenient in these larger farms.
It's pretty close.
We'd have to look at that.
If I remember right, the bigger ones, it was more.
I think it is, but I couldn't tell you right off.
But I personally don't, from what I remember, I wouldn't be concerned, but yeah.
And while we're still on the topic of the RV area, can you state what's the scenario for their wastewater, for gray and black water, all these things?
So if I were able to do the initial program,
Mhm.
it would be totally self-contained. It would be just that they bring their own water, provide their own solar power, electricity or whatever, and contain all their gray water and septic. And then we go just like they would if they were camping up the canyon and dumping it at a dump station somewhere. There's a dump station over just at the campground right by the lake.
Mhm.
I think you can pay to use. So yeah, that would be the main, just because of the cost of infrastructure, right? It costs a lot of money to set up a septic system and allow for water for all those. And so the hope would be to be able to still have some people stay, but with essentially just more limitations because it'd have to be self-contained.
Mhm.
But I also understand you guys might have some concerns about that, right? Obviously, if there's a place for people to hook up, it's just more straightforward and obvious what's going to happen.
Have you applied for any agricultural grants or farming subsidies to assist in your growth?
I have, yeah. So a lot of my high tunnels come from grants, from federal grants, as well as I'm actually doing an elderberry trial right now for the state. It's technically a federal program, but so it's not like funding just to build the farm, but it's funding for specific projects.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
We farm somewhere else as well.
I started my farm in Uinta near Valley Nursery, if you're familiar with that. And it's on borrowed land. And we had the opportunity to buy this property up in Huntsville, and that's have something more permanent. That's what happened.
It's your only farm.
Correct. Yep.
So for the planning commission, my conditions that I'm thinking are no more than 4 nights, no generators after, only in daylight hours. If you're gonna run a generator, it has to be in daylight hours.
Mhm.
And then basically any changes to those conditions would need to be resubmitted, reapplied.
I have a question about some of the structures you plan
Mhm.
to develop at some point. First of all, obviously, I'd like to know what you think your timeline would be. From what I gather, I'm looking at, there's a farm stand, a 2-story pole barn, the RV caravan area, which I imagine is the way that you're describing it, there's nothing really to do, but just go ahead and, if you got approval, to just go ahead and start having people stay.
Yeah, that one would be easier to do.
And then the second house.
Correct.
So what's your timeline for these items?
The first thing would be, we didn't mention this, but the U-pick. And then if I did have permission to do the caravan area without hookups,
Mhm.
then I would imagine doing that in the next 2 years, 2 or 3 years. Obviously, if it required hookups, then it might be many years
Mhm.
farther than that. Second house, not for at least 5 years, 5 to 10 years. And surely, the pole barn also probably in that same 5 to 10 years. The health farm, which you guys haven't addressed at all, as we talked about. Anyway, that's part of the application as well. That would be something I'd hope to do more in the 5 years. My wife teaches yoga at the library, if you guys have ever been. And we're hoping to be able to have a place where she can teach yoga on the farm. But again, depending on like building requirements and all that, just having permission to do health farm as far as doing outdoor yoga in the summertime,
Mhm.
that would happen sooner, and then a structure for the health farm. Again, 5 to 10 years. It's hard to say just because if there's revenue coming in and we
Right.
can improve things, we'll do that. If there's not, then it could be.
What is the structure for the health farm?
It's unplanned at this point.
Is it included in this? I mean, I see a farm stand, which you haven't yet
Do
mentioned.
you have? There should be a map.
I was under the impression the health farm was basically an area for special events. Things like yoga.
Yeah, just this.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, that's just a zone that I put in the blue. If you
So
see
is there
that.
a structure?
Yeah, there would be potentially one day a structure for that.
Okay. And Felix, that's not in this packet, right?
I'm sorry, what is not in this packet?
A structure for the health farm? I don't remember reading it.
You might have an image of a structure. For.
Yeah. I mean, edits, again, depending on finances, we might do something like a yurt to get started. Otherwise, it might be more similar to like a pole barn as well. Would be the easiest way of putting it, like a,
So a second pole barn, because the pole barn in the packet describes housing for farm workers
correct.
in, out of curiosity, and then there's also a processing.
Yep.
And I don't know if we call it a plant, but a processing.
Yeah, just a place to
Area.
vegetables and whatnot.
So the housing for the farm workers, is this also seasonal or is this a year round?
It would most, I mean, in the current farm situation, it would be seasonal. Like I don't have a need for year-round farm employees, but if we expand our greenhouse up growing, then potentially it could be year-round.
And the water and sewer situation for that would be?
It would be, I outlined in, I think the questions that Felix sent that he gave you guys. So at that point, we would need to dig a well. So any additional structures, any additional water, we need to dig a well, as well as provide additional septic, which we'd have to work with the health department. And we've done perk tests and things with the health department just to show that that is a feasible thing that septic systems could be put in.
I would also, as far as accessory dwelling units, I would like to see that not be, I don't think that's applicable to an agritourism operation.
Okay.
And I would think that'd be a condition too, because it's, I mean, are we talking, because I guess my point being is I see where you would need farm workers, right? But you have 90 acres, there's developmental rights associated with that. You can use those to do an accessory dwelling unit. We don't need to have, you know, I don't see how that's related in an agritourism where we're trying to bring people in and then we just say, well, we're bringing them in as Airbnb operation separately.
I understand your hesitancy with ADUs. Specifically, the code is designed to help farmers generate income. In fact, this ADU would be my future house, right? My current house, most of you would not live in.
Then that wouldn't be an ADU, would it? You'd probably.
Well, then they can alternate. So my current house would be the ADU. One way or another. Essentially, there would be two dwelling units. So it's two places for people to live in. I mean, it's within the code. I'm not quite sure what the question is regarding it.
Well, they do. I think they do. Right? They do, don't they? Yeah.
Thank you, Felix.
I just, sometimes I get a little bit lax in my, okay. Excuse me. So 96 acres, he has several development rights. However, under the ADU code, he can only have one ADU. So main house, one ADU.
And under his, I'm sorry, I just can't remember off the top of my head, under his current zoning, how many development rights? Because he's split his farm. I'm sorry to talk about you like you're not here. But you know, there's the grazing pasture that he's separated out. There's the farming crop
Yes.
part, and then some land he wants to separate out for various overnights and various things, as well as special events. So at what point are we calculating these density points?
So if for instance, if he decides he wants to build an ADU, then we can get him a permit for that. And that would use one, or an additional development right
Of how many?
of however many 96 acres has.
Within its zone, even regardless of it being plotted the way that I mean, we're approving a business entity the way he's plotted it. That doesn't change anything.
I'm not sure what the question is.
Okay.
Because, so it would depend on his zone that he's in, right? Some of
That's
them
right.
5 acres, some. So I guess he would have them. And so maybe you can reassure me, because I guess I don't have a problem with the 8 the more I think about it, but the problem I do have is. How do, obviously you applied for this because you knew the code was changing, and some of the rules we put in the new one was to try and make sure that we were not being, that as neighbors and everyone around, we aren't just being sold a bag of goods and said, he said he was gonna be a farm, now he's not.
Yeah.
So, what initiatives can you think of that we can say, hey, he's gonna be a farm, it's gonna be a farm. That's the only thing we really ask, instead of being,
I don't really think you have to put conditions because the code already outlines that it has to be a functioning farm. But you could speak on that. I mean, if you want to, that would just be redundant, but I'm not trying to be combative.
then why apply for the, why for the new code change? Because the new code change was much more specific in of what it was. You mentioned that you wouldn't like to do the no one, but the new one was actually just as open, other than it had some language that wasn't just the future farm or the tax agricultural land hurdle, which I think that's the only hurdle.
So what are you
So
suggesting?
I'm asking, you felt that you needed to do this before the other agritourism change. I saw that the dates were back from 2023.
Yep.
Why do you feel that way? Do you feel that you are trying to do something that is not as part of the agritourism?
No, I mean, I understand the tone of your question. I don't quite understand I'm not quite sure what you're trying to
I guess
get
what
at.
I'm afraid of is, and I get it, you're trying to make it work and I want to make it work. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure on our end that we're doing everything we can to say, you're a farm.
Yeah.
You're doing what you're doing.
I mean, so when I applied to sort of answer your question, I didn't know what the rules were, what was going to change. So I just, at the time too, my first application had a bunch of other uses in there simply because it's like, I don't know. It's just someone with their pen is just going to change what the code is overnight, which is part of my concern. And so at the time, I did not know what that code was. I had the opportunity to get vested under the new code. My biggest hurdle with that was the new code required, as far as setbacks goes, the old code required a vegetative block essentially to reduce distances from structures. The new code required a 6-foot berm and a vegetative block, but it suddenly was just a much more larger infrastructure project to get involved, started on things. So that was my main reason for continuing. And so far as I've observed the new code, you're correct with my acreage. It's by and large the same. Other than that, I'm trying to think if there's
I think it was
anything else.
acreage. Also, you would qualify now. I think you had to be a
Change the
working farm for a couple of years and he would qualify under that.
Yeah.
We did change the setbacks though. Nevertheless. Yeah.
Also to remember that the conditional use permit runs with the land. So if he was to subdivide this area, then we would have to address that at that point. Because right now it runs with the entire parcel that you're considering. So
Explain that so I can understand it better. What that means is if he was to say, I want to subdivide a section off, then it would basically change the conditional use permit.
right,
It would cancel it or make it need to be.
most likely you'd have to come in and comply under the new ordinance at such time that he wants to subdivide the land. So, because right now it runs with the land if you approve it with the conditions that are spelled out. And the conditions that you've mentioned thus far seem reasonable to mitigate possible impacts that this use could have on the area. And so that's for you to decide as a commission.
I personally had one other question. It was, have you had a chance to see this or do you have a copy of this packet? If not, oh, you haven't?
I believe so. I think it's pretty much right. What I submitted? Okay. If you
There,
point me in the right direction.
okay, yeah. The pages aren't numbered. It's right after Exhibit C, UDOT notes, there's a map. lot of pink lines outlining various properties under, after the site plan exhibit
Yeah.
C.
Yep.
Okay, I was wondering if you could help clarify and explain to me, what this map is saying that talks about removing existing access points and driveways and then aligning new access points and driveways with the one or both existing driveways. Just, can you
Yeah.
put that in layman's terms for me?
I'm not the expert, but this is what UDOT said. So they have their own regulations they have different ratings for different highways. And so our highways, I don't even know what was rated, but has different requirements. And because this is a major thoroughfare, at least in the summertime, in order to, like, if you think about it like a artery system, they're trying to minimize how many inlets there are to minimize restrictions and flow. So for them, they wanted us to move our driveways, our entrances, so that they were across from the driveways of adjacent streets. So that there was essentially in that one, wherever there's a dot, those two entrances are consolidated, and there's not 20 different entrances or like whatever, just a check mark of different spots. That makes sense.
So it would cut through your field, basically.
Yeah, so where the arrows point on the bottom where it says align new access points, that's pointing to where they recommend. And according to them, I could add one or two. So, but it would make more sense just logistically to have two if we can afford it. And then get rid of our existing driveway for that purpose. And so the purpose for them again is to minimize congestion on the highway. And I don't know if it's actually gonna make a difference, but that's
Right.
yeah.
Comes to the pole barn and the living facility for farm workers and stuff. How many workers are you anticipating?
Probably no more than 6.
And these are year-round workers.
In the future scenario, possibly, yes. Currently, they would not be. They would probably be from like May to October.
Okay.
Maybe April to October. And as I understand it, not that it matters too much, but from Felix, that's not like a house. It'll have to meet certain county regulations to not be a dwelling. So it's like people can stay there overnight. Sorry, they can sleep there, but they're not going to be like a full-on kitchen or something like that. Is that, did I remember that right? Sorry. But essentially, it's not another house, is what I'm trying to get at. It's not.
Okay.
It's
If someone
for
lives
our
somewhere for
expenditure.
6 months, they're gonna need to be able to prepare food.
Yeah, just to provide some context, I mean, if the way the code kind of describes this use, it really doesn't go into a lot of detail on how that, farm worker housing would be built. And so, I would assume, like you mentioned, they would need, bedroom, kitchen, bathroom. It's just the necessities you would find in a home. So yeah, that I would fully anticipate that if there is farm work.
And maybe it needs to be a condition, but how do we know, no offense, but how do we know that they're farm workers and not weekend rentals?
Yes, and so, I mean, a lot of this, if the owner's past performance is a good indicator, if he's on the up and up, and he says that they're going to be operating under the conditional use permit and all those conditions, then I think it serves the applicant well to trust him in that.
We would have code enforcement go out, and if there is a questionable violation, look at that. And then if there are issues and then he's not willing to come into compliance with that, we would bring it back to you to look at how we handle that, whether we continue on with use or we revoke the conditional use permit.
Is it something that would need to be stated specifically that is for farm workers, or do we actually need to go so far as to say employment papers?
I would specify you know, for farm workers, and this is not an additional dwelling unit. That they have shared facilities, that it's not creating six dwellings on the site. Because you're really only looking at workers on the site here, and you know, where he's indicated that the workers would be there from April to October, you could specify that, you know, in your conditions. You know, those are reasonable things that you could state in the conditional use permit.
Okay.
Because here you're wanting to make sure that you're putting conditions in place to make the use compatible with the surrounding uses in that area. So it has a harmonious effect when you look at this. And that's what those conditional uses, those conditional standards that Felix put up on the screen are intended to do. Just
Does anybody else have any questions?
Sure, I have a question. It says in the old code, section 108, 21.6, number B, it's page 116 of 154 on that handout. Looks like this. Looks like it's code section 108-21-6, use activity standards and limitations. Number 1B, B&B farm dwelling, 2 guest rooms. And then C, B&B farm retreat, 7 guest rooms. So is there, and then B&B farm retreat shall be limited to maximum of 7 guest unit rooms. So is there, you're zoned for, you know, B&B, you could apply for the B&B program that may, you know, bring more income to your farm development. Have you thought about that, or is that an issue you don't want to do, or is that another down the road kind of question? That opens a whole new can of worms here, but I'm just wondering if that's.
I think so under the old code, the B&B had to be attached to your home, if I'm not mistaken. And I think the new code, that was actually one of the things that changed with it, whatever it's called now. It's not a B&B, it's like a, what's it called in the new code? Anyway, I guess you're asking where we can make some more revenue. So potentially with the health farm under the old code, I believe it says you can have guest units on that. And we at one point considered actually doing glamping cabins again, because of financial constraints. So the idea of building a small unit for somebody versus a whole inn or something like that we could technically be permitted for. It's just more financially attainable to do, would be more to do something smaller. And I'm just trying to think here. So yeah, we considered glamping cabins, and I believe under the health farm, if we did that, it has the potential to allow for overnight guests for that. And that's why we chose to go that route as opposed to doing an inn or bed and breakfast type of scenario.
4 rooms, 10 rooms versus 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 for acre. Okay, thank you.
Yep. And I don't know if you guys are planning on moving to approve or not, but with Trevor, your potential condition of the motor coach having to be reapplied for, would it be feasible for that just to be a condition that at that point has to be readdressed by the health department? Like, what does it really, what would necessitate? It just seems like a lot of hoops to jump through to reapply to make the facilities for a longer term, I guess, a more permanent motor coach area. If that makes sense.
the concern there isn't necessarily that farming's a big concern. As I stated before, is are we approving an agritourism thing that's a supplement for the farm business? Well, farmland isn't work, but the trailer park. Would be great. That's the concern.
Okay.
So agritourism is trailers coming, staying, leaving.
Correct.
Trailer park is coming, staying.
Correct.
So you're saying, oh, I make it so that I can long term, well,
No, not long.
trailer park.
Yeah. I'm simply just talking about hookups. So just like if you went to like a
Yeah,
market park.
and
Yeah.
the approval.
Yeah. I have. Not that, I mean, you guys are gonna make your own rules, but I have no qualm with you guys saying that trailer, it can't be a permanent trailer park, because I don't want that either. My wife would divorce me.
As Commissioner Director Grover said, it stays with the land.
Yeah.
Approve something that says, look, neighbor, yeah, we have this. Understand you're frustrated that this is a trailer park now.
Yeah.
The original guy didn't mean. Now it is.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're trying to look after is how do we make sure that your intended is to be great. To stay there.
Yeah.
Which is where, I think Commissioner Schumann might have been, when he invited you, what language would you want to use? Because this often happens in the planning commission is that we believe our applicant and they have fantastic ideas and we want to approve that, but we also have to be aware that it runs with the land and the next person might not have quite the same ethics or intentions, but it's already been approved. And so as much as we're able to tailor it to your in fact intention and we agree with, will actually be best suited for our constituents to put that as conditions.
Yeah.
Because you intend to do it anyway, which is great. But if you were to then turn around and sell, the other people also need to do that.
Okay. Yeah.
So it helps us protect the residents.
Yeah.
I don't think that getting hookups would change duration time in a lot of ways, right? Like, so under that condition of short term, you could still get hookups. It wouldn't change the agritourism portion.
Okay. I think maybe
The intent of the short term, it's come and go. It's not long.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and also too, with some of our, for instance, permanent campgrounds that we have, there's times where they can bring the trailers in and then they have to be removed. For instance, the Eagles, they can come in April and they have to be removed by the end of October. And our code enforcement goes out and looks at those things, but that fell under a campground. That's not what this is. This is associated with the agritourism operation. It's not a campground. So.
But yeah, by all means, having a limitation on duration makes sense. Enough that
That's the concern.
I don't know how much my opinion matters, but anyway.
Right. I don't know how, and this is for discussion, you mentioned, well, I guess it's in the ordinance up to 20 RVs, so we don't need to state that because that's in the ordinance. Okay. All right. Any other commissioners have questions for the applicant? Any commissioners? Yes, well, thank you very much. Any commissioners have any more questions or comments for staff?
Yeah, I somewhere in page item 5, it's about no wall ratio. How much assumed by
agritourism aspect
Mhm.
versus the real farming aspect. Some detail. Do you believe? Not necessarily today. Everything. Proposed. It's in that.
Ooh, good question. Um, yeah,
Stuff, but. Has more applications. There. Being contemplated.
yes.
Just asking you based on. And with what you've seen, the proposal.
Hmm.
Car parking area. Whatever else.
Hmm. Yes. And so, I mean, just looking at what they've proposed on their site plan in the entire 96 acres, it's, I mean, if you're asking my opinion, I would say yes, it's under that 20% and well under that 20%. Because what you're primarily looking at is areas that would not be converted to buildings, or areas that the areas that are being converted to buildings are relatively small in the 96 acre picture.
So the grazing land is farming?
The grazing land is considered, yes, farming.
Okay.
So grazing, yeah, grazing, that's primarily what it's used for.
Okay, so grazing land is farming land, and you have 66 acres for grazing. It says approximately 29 acres south of the canal.
Mhm.
And that doesn't take into account, there's currently a single family home. But also in addition to that, the second home, the various buildings, the health facility, which has up to 10 rooms, and the RV and everything, we're still looking at an 80-20 split.
Yes, I'd be comfortable in saying that, yes.
If you want, it can be a condition that the members get.
Right, but I think they should.
Mhm.
Attention paid to that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? In my experience. Any other questions or comments for planning staff? Going once. Going twice. Thank you, Felix.
Yes, thank you.
So at this point, I'm actually going to ask if there's anyone either in the audience or online that came specifically to discuss anything on this item. Is that possible at all? Anyone online? I don't think there's very many people online. Okay, well then we're not going to open for public comment at all. So next up, I would call for a motion. Would anybody like to make a motion? So our options for motions, something to contemplate, is that we can make a motion to approve. If we do so, obviously there will be conditions that we can and should place upon various things to protect health and safety and life of the residents in the area and everything. We can make a motion to deny. There's also a motion to table if there is information or clarity that would be requested to be able to move it forward once that information is obtained. Approval, denial, or tabling. Does anyone have a motion to make?
I'll motion. A motion to approve CUP 2023 condition or action on conditional use permit for an agritourism operation called the High Mountain Orchard. The condition or the motion to approve is based on the staff recommendation with which in staff recommendation of approval file CUP 2023-10. With the following conditions: sign may be placed no closer than 10 feet from the property line adjacent to a street. Access construction requirements from UDOT must be followed. Owner shall obtain appropriate permits. Owner applies for and keeps a valid business license. All Weber County engineering requirements are satisfied. All fire marshal requirements are satisfied. All Weber Morgan Health Department requirements are satisfied before infrastructure dependent uses shall commence. That any trailer or mobile home stay be less than 4 nights. 4 nights or less, I guess, I should clarify. 4 nights or less. And that no generators be allowed outside, no generator use outside of daylight hours. And that this conditional use permit is based on the findings in the staff report.
Okay.
I'm open to
I think
amendments
Commissioner
if I forgot
Freeman
something.
is open to friendly amendments. Or second.
A friendly amendment, Utah regulations for camping, this is just BLM property, is 14 days. And that's just Utah. I can't find a Weber County limit on campgrounds. I think that's similar, and this is their campground. Is 4 days limiting or is it reasonable? My question. And I don't think it's out of line at all.
I think it's what the applicant had suggested his use is intended for. And the concern we have is the health and safety with the dumping of gray water, black water, with no facilities on site. And he specified that you would need to bring in and take out all of your things.
Or self-contained.
Is that,
Okay.
I mean, I think it's reasonable to 4 nights. It's what the applicant suggested.
Are you, I mean, are you asking for an amendment?
I don't have any.
Do I need a second?
So I'll second that motion.
Seconded by Commissioner Schwebe.
You didn't call for questions. I had a question.
Oh. he's a
Questions
fire
on-
Commissioner. Dave Lorby.
Questions, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
on the motion or?
On the motion, before you second the motion,
Oh,
you call for
okay.
questions.
Fantastic. Yes, sir.
I'm okay with this motion except for, is there a clause that the conditional use the conditions go back if the business fails?
So they, if the business fails, the conditional use would still be valid for a year. And if they don't operate or someone else doesn't come in and operate that business within a year, then it would expire.
Okay,
So,
thank you. No more question.
Are there any other questions on the motion before we accept a second?
Well, the second's accepted.
Did it already? I was looking here. Did it already get seconded?
It was seconded, yeah.
Okay. Then I think the second has already happened and the question can come either before or after the second.
For discussion. Okay, great. Any other discussion? We have a motion on the table to approve based on the 7 findings that are in the staff report, as well as that any trailer or mobile home stay would be 4 nights or less. And an additional one of no generator use outside of daylight hours. And there is a second to that. Any discussion on the topic or on the motion? All right, then I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Everybody vote. I didn't see it. That I believe for the record, that's a unanimous vote in favor of 6-0. I'm missing one commissioner, 6-0. All right, congratulations. All right, so next up on our agenda is public comment for items not on the agenda. Do we have anybody? I don't see anyone online. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to comment on anything not on the agenda? All right. I have gotten a confirmed no from our audience member. Any remarks from our planning commissioners? Does anybody have any comments they wish to make? Any topic at all?
I'd just like to thank the applicant for your time and sharing your ideas and fielding questions with us tonight.
We wish you great success. The planning director report, is there anything to report, Director Grover?
no, it's been fairly strange. We haven't had much going on up in the Ogden Valley, so I have nothing to report.
Any remarks from legal counsel? Is there anything we need to know?
Nope, not tonight.
Right. Then I move to adjourn this meeting. All right, we don't vote on that?
Oh, yeah, there we go.